We are just 6 weeks away from Election Day. And with all of that, the polls, well, they can be hard to tell where the race stands. But thankfully, we've got Steve Kornacki. He is at the big board to help break down all of it. All right, Steve, right now, what are the numbers telling us? It's great to see you.
You too, Steph. And, well, let's take a look because there have been a lot coming out there in the last couple of days here. First of all, you've probably seen these headlines in the last couple of days. Our own NBC poll had Kamala Harris ahead by 5. CBS had her up 4. CNN just this afternoon, Harris by 1. Quinnipiac today, they're in a tie. And there have been many others. So let's show you the average here. This is the average of all the polls recently, all of them conducted post-debate. Where does that net out? It nets out on average to Harris by 3 points in the national horse race right now. Now, of course, what we've seen in 16 and in 20, the last 2 elections, is that Donald Trump fell short in the national popular vote both times. He won once and he nearly won a second time because of the Electoral College. So what do things look like in the 7 core battleground states? Looking at our poll averages in these states right now, and what jumps out, I think, is a bit of a north-south divide. Look at where you see the Harris blue here, where you see her best results: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, her 3 best results, those 3 sort of Big Ten states. You got Nevada, Harris leading in the average there by about 1.5 points. Nevada, a particularly volatile state with polling, too, a little bit hard to nail down, but that's what you have there. And then Trump's strength right now, Georgia, Arizona. And then you got a tie there in North Carolina, but Trump doing on the whole in the polling a little bit better in the Sun Belt than he is in those Midwest states. And, of course, for Trump, probably the situation is he's got to get like Georgia, Carolina. He could then win with Pennsylvania. He could do something with. The point for Trump is he's going to have to win almost certainly one of those 3 Big Ten states right now where Harris is polling the best. But, of course, these are very close margins.
Let's talk about this, because Politico is reporting that some Democrats justifiably are worried that the Teamsters' non-endorsement of Harris was this warning sign that she's got real work to do with working-class voters, despite the fact that so much of what Joe Biden has delivered, his legislative wins, have delivered for blue-collar workers.
So, Steph, we just showed you Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and take a look. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, these 3 states among the 7 core battleground states have the highest adult populations of white voters without 4-year degrees, blue-collar white voters. And, of course, we talk about this as a core Trump constituency in 16 and in 20. But another feature has been polling misses among this group of voters, blue-collar white voters, particularly in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, both in 2016 and in 2020. So keep that in mind. That last graphic I showed you, where Harris has her best poll average numbers in those 3 states, they're also the 3 states that are sort of chock full of that Trump-friendly demographic that has been underestimated, undercounted, really, in polling in terms of his extent of its support for Trump the last 2 times around. If that happens again, those small Harris poll average leads in those states look a lot different.
It's undercounted. Why? Because people are voting for him, but they don't like to talk about it because they don't want to deal with the headache?
Well, there's all sorts of theories about why pollsters have not been able to adequately capture the segment. It's a large segment, but the segment of the blue-collar white population that's pro-Trump. But one of the things that happens is you can get, demographically speaking, just in terms of being representative of the population as a whole, you could get the correct number of blue-collar white voters in your poll. But there are still blue-collar white voters who vote Democratic. There aren't as many who vote Republican in these states or vote Trump in these states. And what may end up happening in these polls is they get more willingness from the Democratic side of that, the Democratic segment there, to actually answer the phone and go through the poll process than on the Republican side. A lot of different theories for why those Trump voters have been hard to reach for pollsters, but it certainly seems that they have been. It certainly seems that that's been the issue in the polling in those states.
What about the ceiling? Because VP Harris still has areas where she can expand support. But Trump, it seems like he's got a ceiling. Is that the case?
Well, certainly, look, talking about 46% or so, 47% generally is what people think, just based on the last 2 elections, though there have been some polls where he's polled a little bit higher than that this time around. One area to look at for Trump is He's shown some growth in the polls relative to 2020 and 2016 among non-white voters. Now, among black voters, what you're looking at here, this is our average of all the different polls that are out there right now. And on average, Trump's sitting in the mid-teens there among black voters. Now, again, these numbers will bounce around from poll to poll, so it's a little bit hard to nail down. But we could say, historically speaking, if anything like this were to play out in the election, 15% for a Republican among black voters in a presidential election would be at the very high end of what we've seen in modern times. And that, it's small, but that could boost Trump in a state like Georgia, a state like North Carolina, a state with a large black population. Just that kind of improvement from the mid-high single digits to the mid-teens. And then among Hispanic voters, this was a very big story in 2020, of course. Trump made big strides with Hispanic voters. Well, again, you're looking at our average of all the polls right now among Hispanic voters. Harris 54, Trump 41. Again, if this were to be what actually played out in the election, that would represent further progress, further growth for Trump among Hispanic voters. You start thinking about in Arizona, Nevada, this would come into play, though, certainly in Georgia as well, 10% Hispanic there. So, again, this would represent growth for Trump. We talk about, is he locked in based on 16 and 20? Here are two demographic groups, particularly Hispanics, where he has shown some improvement from the last time around.